This episode is brought to you by Thorne, and I have some incredible news for any of you that are in the military, first responder, or medical professions. In an effort to give back, Thorne is now offering you an ongoing 25% off each and every one of your purchases of their incredible nutritional solutions. Now, Thorne is the official supplement of CrossFit, the UFC, the Mayo Clinic, the Human Performance Project, and multiple special operations organizations. I myself have used them for several years, and that is why I brought them on as a sponsor. Some of my favorite products they have are their Multivitamin Elite, their Whey Protein, the Super EPA, and then most recently, Cinequil. As a firefighter, a stuntman, and a martial artist, I've had my share of brain trauma and sleep deprivation, and Cinequil is their latest brain health supplement. Now, to qualify for the 35% off, go to thorne.com, thorne.com. Click on sign in and then create a new account. You will see the opportunity to register as a first responder or member of military. When you click on that, it will take you through verification with GovX. You'll simply choose a profession, provide one piece of documentation, and then you are verified for life. From that point onwards, you will continue to receive 35% off through Thorne. Now, for those of you who don't qualify, there is still the 10% off using the code BTS10, Behind the Shield 10, for a one-time purchase. Now, to learn more about Thorne, go to episode 323 of the Behind the Shield podcast with Joel Totoro and Wes Barnett. This episode is sponsored by Team Builder, yet another company that's doing great things for the first responder community. As a strength and conditioning coach myself who also trains tactical athletes, dissemination of wellness information is one of the biggest challenges. Now, Team Builder is the premier strength and conditioning software for tactical athletes, and there are several features that really impress me. Firstly, there is a full exercise library, so you, the personal trainer, does not have to create that within your own department. Secondly, you can send out programming, but also individualize, which I love. So you blanket program for everyone. Now you can tweak based on someone's injury, someone's need to maybe drop some body composition, rather than having to write a program for every single person on their own. Team Builder also allows you to build custom questionnaires to collate health and wellness data. It integrates with wearables. And I think one of the most important things is obviously it tracks. To me, it's imperative that we as a profession start tracking our people from day one and then over the full span of their career, therefore catching potential wellness issues and injuries before they happen. Now, if you want to try Team Builder, they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, a free 14-day trial to experience all of the features. And if you want to take a deeper dive into Team Builder, listen to episode 1032 with Melissa Mercado, or go to teambuilder.com. And I'll spell that to you because it's not as you'd think, TEAMBUILDR.com. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show 26-year veteran of the fire service, and one of the two men behind managing a fire company, John Brunacini. Now, for those of you listening, you'll recognize that last name, so we discuss a host of topics, from growing up in a legacy firefighter family, the blue card, leadership, firefighter fitness, sleep deprivation, managing the humans in the fire station, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of almost 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you John Brunacini. Enjoy.
John, I want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast.
Happy to be here.
So where on planet Earth are we finding you today?
As you can see, I have a man cave in the garage where my computer is. So, but I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm hanging out at home. Sorry, I was a little late. I got our time zones mixed up, so I apologize.
No problem. Isn't Arizona like part of your state? They change with the times, and part of them they don't change with the times. Is that right?
The whole state of Arizona does not change.
Doesn't
I think
change.
us and Hawaii are the only two out of the 50 that don't.
Yeah, I think the rest of us need to join you. It's insanity. Even if you look at the sleep medicine, that they have more suicides and heart attacks the day we lose sleep than any other day of the year. Excuse me, of the year.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it makes no sense these days. All right, well then let's start at the very beginning. Obviously, with the last name, a lot of people in the fire service would recognize that. So tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, a long time ago. My dad was a firefighter. My mom was going to school and she became a nurse. My brother was first. I was second, and then I had a sister behind me. So I'm born and raised in Phoenix and still living here over 60 years.
Beautiful. Now, obviously, your dad is known, as one of the leaders when it comes to the fire service. As a human being, though, as a son of a firefighter, talk to me about your memories of him being in that profession when you were little.
He became the fire chief. So I was born in 62. He became the fire chief in 78. So I was 16 years old when that happened. But I think, like most kids growing up, they know what their parents do, but they don't, I don't know, they don't really think about it much. They have their own. So I knew my dad was a firefighter, and he built his own house. So there's always firefighters over there helping him build a house. But my dad, people say he's a firefighter, or like a banker or a lawyer or something. He was just his occupation. So it wasn't until I graduated from high school and really started working for the fire department that, like, okay, he's the fire chief, and a big deal, and everybody wants to kiss his ring and that whole 9 yards. But growing up, he was just my dad. That was his job. So
Someone made a
I
comment.
know, not very exciting.
No, it's good. So someone made a comment the other day that, and they were talking about the way that our profession is perceived now versus how it used to be. Like, you kind of just labeled, you were a banker, you were a construction worker, you were a firefighter. In conversations with your dad and then your own perspective, what is the difference outside of New York in the fire service between pre 9/11 and post 9/11?
I don't know. It's like asking somebody, "Are you happy?" Are we happier before 9/11 as a service, or are we sadder as a service? I don't know. I think we've made a lot of improvements since then. I think it's made a lot of people aware. I think kids today don't want to get it on them nearly as much as my generation, to where all the cancers and stuff are more out there and aware. So I think it's lessened some of our hiring pools. But to me, it's always, I hope it's getting better instead of worse. What do you think?
Well, I think actually to kind of clarify the question, but I didn't present it very well because I remembered now it was more about being perceived as a hero, and prior to
Oh,
9/11, they were saying, well, yeah, we were just firefighters then. But after this, especially with this younger generation, there's a danger of leaning into the identity as a firefighter and having the mustache and the leather helmet, almost like being seen to look as a firefighter, which is kind of matched with that post 9/11 adoration. And I was a post 9/11 firefighter myself, so I never experienced prior. But they were saying before that there wasn't a lot of this talk, and obviously what the men and women of FDNY and the other responders did in New York by the Pentagon, responding to the crash of '93. That was absolutely heroic. But as an entire profession, he felt like it had been skewed after that event.
I know because I was on the Phoenix Fire Department. I joined the department in 1980, so I kind of did see before and after. I know that my dad, as a fire chief, really exploited city council for a lot more money he was able to get after those events, so that was a good thing. I don't know about being a hero. I think we were held in high esteem and regard in our communities before that anyway. But shortly after that, I mean, my crew walked into a bar. It was crowded, like 9 o'clock in the evening. I mean, the place was packed. And when we walked in there, the whole place stood up and applauded for us. So, I mean, that had never happened before. But, I mean, that wore off a couple months, and then they just kind of always treated the way they always treated us, I thought. I don't know.
Yeah,
interesting. I don't know.
I mean, I think certainly when it comes to actually putting their money where their mouth is, and I think it's the same with COVID. The frontline heroes work here. When they were asking for more staffing and PPE and beds, they were like, "Oh, we're just going to clap." And it's the same with us. When we actually asked for the funding for a fourth shift, for the fourth person on the rig, whatever it is that we absolutely need. Now, all of a sudden, I feel like certainly in modern times, there's none of that support, at least in a lot of areas.
Yeah. So we're scratching and clawing for all the resource that we kind of, as a service, has always done. Maybe we had a good period there for a while, a bubble where they gave us some money. But then there was a recession.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. All right. Well, let's go back on your timeline then. So when you were kind of going through the school years, what are you playing and doing as far as exercise and sport?
I played baseball in grade school. And then when I got to high school, I'd never played organized football up until high school. And then I joined the football team as a freshman, and that started out the year. So I played football. I wrestled. And then my dad built his own house, so that was never finished. So I was also a quasi pseudo ditch digger, mason. So I was working outside at a very young age. I think my dad had kids just so that he could make slaves out of us to help build stuff.
I grew up on a farm. I can relate 100%.
Yeah, you just had me to work here.
Well, it's interesting when people have played team sports and also played individual sports, and I did both growing up as well. I was a martial artist, but then I also played hockey and some other sports. There's interesting lessons from each of those two dynamics. So when you reflect back now, how did those sports factor into areas of your leadership as you progress through the fire service?
What I remember most is, you're high school, a lot of hormones, or, flying, you're angry at a lot of stuff. So football kind of saved me because it let me take out a lot of aggression. I mean, legally, you could smash into people at high speeds and, nothing would happen. So it kind of got me through high school, just mentally having a valve, to get rid of steam. That's what I remember most about it. And then too, the camaraderie and hanging out with, a team. That's always good. And that translated, directly right into the fire service. And like you say, I think most people sitting around a fire station table have been involved in some sort of team, something, military, sports. So, but out of high school, I had no aspirations of continuing on college sports or anything else.
Well, speaking
I
of
like
that,
my knees, and my shoulders, my elbows. So I got out when all my stuff still kind of worked.
That's good, and you still enjoyed the sports. You weren't completely burned out like a one sport athlete.
No, and then when it was a very popular sport when I joined, and I joined young. I was 18 years old when I got on the fire department. Basketball was the rage, so I played a lot of basketball through my 20s into my early 30s. So,
What was your dad's ethos as a family as far as physical fitness and how it pertains in the fire service?
there's a lot of people that know this, but a lot of people that don't. My dad built a gym in his backyard. That's how committed he was, and it wasn't just a workout room. It was 1,200 square feet. It had a bathroom, shower, locker room. It had a array of cardio. He had cable equipment, free weight, squat racks, leg machines. I mean, it was a gym. So he was very committed to that. And then, two, he had a saying. I had it in the book when we're talking about managing physical fitness. Firefighters are professional athletes that don't get a warm up period. So, and that's really, and if you look at physical fitness, I, when we're out teaching, managing a fire company, I say it's really one of the most important things a company officer manages, making sure that everybody is working out and staying in shape. And, that all starts out by themselves doing that. But it's a three prongs. First of all, we have a very physical job. We got to wear a lot of heavy equipment, so we have to be in really good physical condition to do a couple work cycles in that environment. The second part of being in good shape is the better shape you are in, the better your body can resist stress and free radicals. So it really helps us, and those are the environments that we're working in, right? Free radicals are bombarding us, and the better shape we're in, the better we are at staying healthy. And then the third part of it is our mental wellness and what being in good physical condition does. And a lot of that, like when Tim Dietz, I know he's been on your show, we get bonked out on a lot of stuff, and those are triggers that start dumping these stress hormones into our bodies, and we go on these events where we don't need them to get through them. The adrenaline and the cortisol, and we come back to the fire station, and that stuff is in our bodies, eating us away. So the way we get rid of all that is through exercise. So it gets rid of stress hormones, all the good stuff. So firefighters have to be physically fit if you're going to be in the field.
Why is it you think that there's such a resistance to actually having a fitness standard? And when I say a fitness standard, I'm not talking about something that people made up where it's a 500 deadlift and a vertical jump, but something similar to a CPAT where regardless of age or gender, you're just moving around the equipment that we have to do for our job.
It's the lunacy of our service, isn't it? What's the number one killer?
Yeah, I mean, heart disease, cancer, and now we've got suicide. I think doubling all of those, but yeah, all interrelated.
And what is the number one way to combat all that?
Exercise and nutrition.
So why don't we have standards that combat all the stuff that is the number one killers? And and to me it's okay, we talk about the killer, but we don't talk about the 10 other people that had an event that didn't kill them, and now they're disabled in some capacity for the rest of their life. So they're not living to the fullest because of I don't know, James. Typically, they resisted my doctor and those lines of things that and I get protecting your confidentiality, but I mean, when we're in a hazard zone, our lives are kind of depending on the physical condition of the people next to us, right? So,
yeah,
I'm with you.
Well, it's interesting because I have a lot of people, from all walks of life on here, but I have, special ops and even tier one, special forces soldiers. I have the strength and conditioners and nutritionists and sports psychologists that work with those people as well. And when I'm talking to those groups, we're talking about forging performance. We're talking about endurance and strength and breath work and all these things. When those same professionals work with our profession, more often than not, and you see this even in the IAFF's peer peer fitness training, there's a conversation of, well, let's just get them moving. Let's try and reduce the heart disease, which is not performance. That's not taking a man or a woman and making sure they can put on 100 pounds of gear and then climb 30 stories before they go to work. So there's such a chasm when we've allowed this fitness standard to just be non-existent between forging performance and having, elite firefighters. And if you look, for example, at the Paris firefighters, male, female, they're in phenomenal shape. And, look at what they did in Notre Dame, for example, or the Bataclan shooting. And then you look at, worst case scenario where you've got no standards and no fitness standards. And as you said, we all know there's many of us in uniform are not where we're supposed to be physically. And when lives are at stake, you're putting yourself at risk, you're putting your crew at risk. And the person that you're supposed to be getting, if you go down, now you become the number one priority. So the fact that we've opposed these fitness standards for so long, it disgusts me. And I think it's something that we have to get together as a profession and rectify.
I totally agree. A lot of fire departments, we didn't have it in Phoenix, but a lot of fire departments now have like mandatory physical fitness times, during the shift. And so they're creating a culture where they're allowing the company officer, the opportunities that are more ingrained in the daily schedules. So, there's a lot of stuff that a fire department can do, but there's always that, I don't know, once you get hired, it's like very few places keep visiting an annual physical fitness standard. So
I was a lifeguard for a long time, and we had to requalify every 2 years. Can you imagine me saying it's not fair that you have to test my swimming? You're trying to take my job.
Exactly. You mentioned that we had a couple people from Miami-Dade on our validation committee for our textbook, and one of the things they did a long time ago is they have to be lifeguard class 3 or something as part as being in the field because of all the water around Miami. Well, every year they got to go swim 3/4 of a mile within a certain amount of time. He said that right there keeping their lifeguard card to stay in the field is what keeps their department in shape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but Phoenix, the closest body of water you can put in a glass, or a pitcher. We don't get that excuse. Yeah. Ours is like we have mountains that kind of surround the valley, and there's low, high angle rescue. So they're running up and down, 3-mile trails. So, they have to be in really good shape to do stuff like that. And like you say, the journey to get to where you work is, you got to be in really good shape just to get there. And now that you get there, you got to do the work. So,
yeah. Well, I think is it Newton's third law of motion, and it's the one where they show it takes 5 people to start pushing a car, and as the car gets faster, people peel away, and then one person can keep it going. It's the same with fitness. If you've got to that standard as you've gone through the academy, it takes very little effort to actually sustain it. And to be very fair, and I always say this, the work week doesn't help. The understaffing and mandatory overtime doesn't help because we're setting them up for failure now. So we have to fix the environment too. But if at the front door you say, all right, you're already fit, we're just going to keep you fit, that's a lot easier than telling that 300-pound engineer that he or she has got to get back to, 220 and active again.
Well, and that's if they did make standards, right? Do they grandfather? We're only going to hold the people that we hire from this point forward to this, and anybody that has been hired before this has happened, keep eating the cheese puffs,
Nope.
I don't know.
No, I think that's why fire prevention was invented. You can go over there, go check extinguishers while the personal trainers get you back in shape. And because you get this, if you I don't want to put in the work, all right, well then it's definitely good thing that you're not on the rig, because if you've got that little interest in even getting fit, how used are you going to be on the scene?
I totally agree. And especially as a company officer, out delivering service, you want to be able to physically depend on the people that are on your unit. Are you familiar? Like Phoenix had its own health center, own doctors, and we had annual physicals, and the whole. It was very extensive, and I don't know, going through a process like that, your employer cares, right? But we had a tier system, tiered fitness level. Are you familiar with that? And then
Somewhat.
my dad worked with the union, the fitness initiative, and all that stuff for years. And again, it was always a challenge. But we had 4 levels, 4 tiers of fitness. And tier one, you could see your abs. So maybe about 10% of our fire department was actually tiered one. And they were very strict about it too. Tier two, I think you were in a lot. One of the factors was your body fat. So tier two were people that had in between, I don't know, it was like 12 and a half to 20% body fat was a tier two body fat. That was probably about 70% of our department. But believe me, they had endurance. Uh-huh. And then there was tier three, where tier three, you were like a fire. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. And you need to do a certain set of things when you're in this category. And then tier four was you have a certain set of things wrong with you where you can't be out in the field delivering service anymore. I sent 2 people in my career that were really out of shape, clinically obese, and then they're narcoleptic. They can't sleep. They bring in a CPAP machine, the size of a small Volkswagen, uh, and I go, you can't work here. I mean, you're out of breath just getting on the truck. So I sent them down to the health center. They come back. They're tier three. They put the letter down. I mean, what does a company officer do when that happens? Because, like you say, there's no standard where, okay, physically you have the body fat, blah blah blah, and you don't have this bad of a medical condition, but you can't go out there and do a CPAT test. You can't get through it. So that would be the defining factor. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's
I
that
don't know.
longevity
Yeah.
versus performance conversation. If you are,
Mm-hmm.
in great shape, the longevity is tied into that. You are going to have a longer, healthier retirement because you've taken care of your heart and your lungs and your blood vessels and all the things, your GI tract. But yeah, if you're scraping through, and I always say, like, there's that phrase, would you want you rescuing you? And that's good. But my thing is, make it more raw than that. How would you feel if your family died because a rescuer hadn't trained? It's inexcusable. It cannot be allowed to happen. So doesn't mean you just fire everyone on the spot. You give them an on ramp to get him back. But if they choose not to put in the work to get back to being in shape to be a firefighter, that's on them then. That's not you. You knew the expectations at the front door because the minimum standard state, you've got to be able to do all that work that you did in the academy. So you can't say it's unfair. You knew from day one.
I totally agree. And then too, if you look at if how much money would that save a fire department over a course of 20 years having a in fit shape workforce? It drastically reduce several negative factors.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's get back onto your journey. So you have this firefighter family. Were you yourself thinking of the fire service when you were in the school ages, or was there something different in mind?
No, I was computers just got invented. Uh, yeah. So, and then I had some run-ins, with some. Well, I was kind of drifting. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had a couple events that my mom actually uh, came in to my bedroom with a hiring packet and said, "You need to go down and do something because you're on a path to we're worried about you." So I had never thought about joining the fire department up to that point. So I applied. I was still in high school when they did the test. I just turned 18, so then I got in. But before that, I really, I had, I had never thought about. And my brother had joined the fire department ahead of me about a year, but still, I didn't see that as my career path.
So what was
And
that
then when
kind
I
of on ramp for you when you joined? Were you actually kind of bitten by the bug by that point?
no, it wasn't until I got out in the field. Uh, uh, I I hated running, like long distance running. I couldn't stand it. And every morning in the academy, we had to run like 5.2 miles. Like we're going to run to the incident scene. So, man, the academy, I dreaded every morning. And, it was fun learning the vocation and everything, but just that part of it. So, but when I got out in the field, I don't know, like, people are having their worst day and you get to show up and make their day better. I don't think there are very many people that are in jobs like that. And the two, every day is different. You don't know what's going to happen. You're not in this doldrum, where. So it was a couple years into the job. I love being a firefighter. I look forward to coming to work every day. I love the people I work with. So I fell in love with it.
How competitive was it to get hired back then?
Oh God, probably a test 3 to 4,000 people for 100 jobs. Yeah, it was very competitive. But today still Phoenix is high regarded. It's a big city. They're starting to rehire firefighters, trying to get back where they need to be. And someone told me they had 4,000 people show up for like 250 this year. So that's a good ratio.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of places I know that are a lot worse off at the moment. One of the things that someone said to me, and it was very profound. They were like the biggest recruitment tool that we have in the fire service are the firefighters themselves. And same in the military. You used to talk about how proud you were to be a firefighter, and it would inspire your kids and your kids' friends and your co-workers, and all of a sudden you'd be pulling people into this profession. But I've heard from many people, and this would even be my perception, even though I am sure we are in the beginning of a renaissance, that we are going to change the fire service, the things that need to be changed when it comes to the human element, if you like. But right now, a lot of firefighters are dissuading their children, their friends from coming into this job. So when you reflect back now to 80s, 90s, and beyond, how strong was that element? How powerful, as far as recruitment, were the men and women that you were serving with?
Like, do you mean like, okay, the people that I hang out with, and I'm talking to them about bringing them, you should join the fire department?
Yeah, exactly. The influence of simply firefighters saying, this is an amazing job, you need to do this, and getting people fired up to come into this profession.
Man, there's a lot of people that I knew became firefighters. God, I don't know. But I think it's getting less and less. Like you said, I think the more awareness of what we're doing, it's not a very good recruiting tool, is it? Hey, come on over. We're going to dip you in a bucket of cancer, and then we're going to sleep deprive you, and then we're going to emotionally traumatize you with the worst things that you can ever see dealing with humanity. So it's kind of a trifecta of a cocktail. We're going to stress you out, the whole 9 yards. And then, like you've been saying, we're understaffed. We're going to overwork you on top of all the other bad stuff that just, even if it was, we had a good work schedule, it would still be a very stress and job. So, and I think, I deal with Tim Dietz a lot, the post-traumatic stress behavioral guy, and he goes around setting up stuff in fire departments. He says that kids are different today, so they're a lot more aware. And but what ends up happening is, and I think it was in my day, is the people that are attracted to our service, a great percentage of them are comfortable in chaos. So I think there's always going to be a group of people that were raised in a certain way where they're just attracted to our service. And then two, a lot of the altruism that comes with some of those people in those environments, they want to give back and prevent what happened to them. So I don't know. We're always going to have people to hire from that group.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think this is it. I find it very, very encouraging because most people, some idiots still say kids today don't want to work. They're all on their phones. Da, da, da. It's like, yeah, there's a group, but like I always point out, there's a group of our generation that spent most of their time sitting in front of the TV eating chicken wings. You know, that's the same exact type of person. But this generation now, and the Wall Street Journal did a piece on this, are going into the trades because this awareness that they're having, this ability to really find out information from this little rectangle in their hand, they're looking at college. And these young people are going, so wait a sec, $60,000 worth of debt and a piece of paper that doesn't guarantee me a job? That doesn't sound good. Well, you put that same thing as you just laid out with the fire service with mandatory overtime and divorces and suicides and all the things. These people are looking at the hero stuff, as we talked about earlier, but they're also seeing that and they're going, I really want to serve, but let me find a different way of serving. The fire service doesn't sound sustainable, which is funny because when I talk about 24/72, there's someone on Facebook and they got a joint account. So that speaks loudly. Their wife has to be on the same account as them, but they always say unsustainable. And I'm like, I don't respond to any dickheads on social media, but what's unsustainable is the way that we do it now, not the way that we're trying to change it to. We know it's unsustainable because we're in the middle of a recruitment crisis. The proof is in the pudding. But you change the work environment to a group of young men and women that value their relationships, understand the importance of sleep, the importance of fitness, the importance of their relationships, being present with their family because maybe their parents weren't because they were, sleep when I'm dead, working to the ground. And you attract them with the working environment. Now they're going, I do have a servant's heart. And now I see that you're actually going to take care of you people. Sign me up. I want to be there. So I think we have an amazing pool of young men and women, but we as a profession have to look in the mirror and go, these are the things that we need to fix. And when we do, we're going to turn this thing around.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the 72-24. Am I saying that right?
24/72. But it doesn't mean it's irrelevant which way it is.
Yeah, but and I wrote a chapter in our textbook that's on sleep deprivation, and I've also hung out with fire departments that have gone that work schedule. What is your experience? Do you know the fire departments that have gone to that schedule, and what's the effect of that?
Yeah, I've got a very unique lens, and I hope that this podcast was part of the reason why this happened. But in the last year, 7 fire departments went from 24/48 to 24/72. And a great example is Gainesville, which is my neighbor here, where I went to college, actually, UF. They just switched. They were struggling to hire. I mean, they were taking a big part of the list instead of, as we just touched on, 5-10% of the list. And they announced that they were going to 24/72. They did it in a way where they were like, all right, we're just going to open up the shift. And the personnel were like, we will cover these spaces as you fill them. So initially there was more overtime for a short amount of time, but they went to it in September. This month, they are fully staffed, 4 shifts. That's how many recruits started lining up outside their door to come here. And the FSU has done baseline testing before they switched. And I've got someone coming on with the results next month, and they're doing tests again. Now they've gone to 24/72. But recruitment goes up. Certainly, obviously, the happiness and health of the firefighters has gone up. It's a money-saving initiative because most of the overtime now goes away, at least the 24 overtime. And still all the day overtime. But so now these men and women are back at home in their beds when they're supposed to be. So I've heard nothing but great things. And this is the thing. I always ask people, the administrators, the chiefs, they work 40 hours. Explain to me why you need to work 56 when you're the one out responding to these. The person goes home at 5 o'clock every day, that pushes papers around all day, but you see and do all the things that we have to do, and you need to work 56. It doesn't make any sense. So when people have made the switch, every department that I know so far in Florida, they're already seeing a huge uptick in staffing. They've got guys that were getting ready to leave that now aren't leaving, so they're retaining a lot of their more salty, knowledgeable firefighters. So yeah, it's a win-win-win every single time that I've heard of so far.
Is that the schedule? You work 1 on and you're off for 3?
Yeah,
Or
and
do
even
they do
so
a Kelly thing?
24/72. No, 24/72. So it's ongoing. Yeah, and it's funny because even the verbiage that we've always used, 1 day on, 2 days off. I had an aha moment
Mhm.
not that long ago, a couple of years ago. I'm like, why do we call that? A day is 8 hours. A civilian day is 8 hours with a 1 hour lunch.
Mhm.
So it's 3 days on, 1 day off is what we've always worked. So all it's gone to now is 3 days on, 2 days off is actually
And
what
and
it
that
is.
that ends up being 42 hours a week, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, which is what everyone else works. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's funny. I did a talk to help one of the local counties try and persuade their county to move to this. And I happen to just be messing around with some math. The 40-hour work week person, if you extrapolate over the year, they work 260 days a year. If you divide what we work into 8-hour days, on a 56-hour work week, it ends up being 364 days a year. So we get 1 day off a year. So when you put it in those terms, people are just mind blown. But when we've said we have this amazing schedule, I work 10 days a month, 1 day on, 2 days off, we don't realize that we've been telling ourselves kind of fairy tales the whole time.
Wow, we've been getting gypped out of a lot of overtime. Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, exactly. But here's the beautiful thing with that. And this is what's interesting. We all know the guys that are all in the profession, that's their identity. And then when they retire, everything falls apart. If you don't have a lot of overtime available, there'll always be overtime, of course, sick days and events and all those kind of things. Now it kind of forces people, if you want to make extra money, to kind of go down the entrepreneurial path. I just had Paul Conway on the show yesterday. So he's, got a shield company, for example. Now you have that separate business, separate tribe, separate financial safety net. And again, not working on, overnight in the ER, not working on an ambulance company, something where you're still home every night with your family. That's a positive. Make more money if you need more money. Just don't do it getting, staying in the meat grinder at a fire station.
I I've heard both sides. It's great, and then the way they do it is different. Some people go to a Kelly way to do that, where you're on 1, off 2, on 1, off 2, on 1, off 7 or something. And then but a couple large metros, Washington D.C. was one of them. Went to a 4 shift, and what I heard from their senior staff was they kind of lost their fire department because having 3 days off in a row, it kind of became more of a side job. And then they couldn't watch out for people as much. Instead of gaining a half a pound on your 2 days off, they came in with 3/4 of a pound they had gained. So they, but I think the other sides of it are the sleep deprivation and all the other stuff it prevents. Uh, it, Even if you're in a 1 on 2 off, if you have, let's say you don't have enough people to make a 4 shift, but the goal should be having at least what you have adequately staffed, and then having more than that, so that at least the people have opportunities to take multiple shifts off a month. The opportunities are there because you're staffed enough, and that doesn't put pressure on the rest of everybody else that's working. So if we could just get up to that level, I think we would be way ahead of the ball game.
Yeah, well, I think the way that we do that, though, is we have to bring these people back. And that goes back to the 42. And it's interesting with the DC, whoever said that, because if you look at the science that's behind sleep deprivation and all the things, it causes obesity, it causes diabetes, it causes heart disease and cancer. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's no way in hell that they're coming back less healthy than they would have. They're definitely. And then again, that goes back to the fitness standards. If you want to go eat cake for 3 days, that's fine, but you better be ready to do the CPAT or whatever it is. So, but that disconnection, yeah, the only thing that I've heard is, you see, say you're a B shifter like your brother, A shift is off going, C shift is oncoming. You always see that. I think that's the only thing, as they've said, it's a bit weird because there's some shifts that you don't see. But when I worked in California, it was 1 on, 1 off 4 times, and then we had a 4 or a 6 at the end. So a lot of times you wouldn't see, it would kind of rotate through as well. You'd have, one shift that you saw all the time, you never saw C shift for an entire tour. And then, so, is that a terrible thing? I don't think so. If you're, because then you pick up overtime and you do trades and stuff, then you get to start to see other shifts. But I think that's, a very poor reason not to go to the 24/72. And I think, again, even filling, like you said, people have said to me, we want to get a 4th person on the rig first, and then we'll talk about that. And it goes back to, well, how are you going to get, if you can't even hire now, what makes you think they're magically going to start lining up to be your 4th person? They're not. You've got to fix the work week first. And the irony is, Boston, New York, some of the original fire services, they work a 42-hour week. No one brings that up. The original fire departments work a 42-hour week. It's the rest of us that are behind.
Oh, I definitely agree. But like at Phoenix, my God, what would that cost to go to a 4th shift? Each shift right now has about 450 people on it. So, and then how long does it take to get up there? But I totally agree that we got to do something. I mean,
yeah. And I think the biggest thing is, as this happens, because a lot of departments are saying, Miami-Dade, for example, is still sought after hire, but all these other departments are now going to this better work week. So that recruitment that was kind of a luxury because you were known as a destination department, now that starts kind of tapering off because the agencies around you have got a better work week. And then, so some departments will be forced into it later, but most departments, the money is the overtime. The money is, the cost of hiring all these recruits, and then 100 of them walk out the back door in the next 2 years. It's the workman's comp claims, it's the medical disabilities, it's the line of duty death payments, it's the lawsuits from when we're so tired and we make mistakes and we hit vehicles and push the wrong meds. So the money is all there. It's all downstream, though. We've got to have the courage to put it at the front, proactive.
Sign me up.
It's a big old sales pitch there.
Part of it too, though, is if you work one shift and you have 3 days off, you're going to recover from that one shift a lot better. But when you're that one shift and it's 2:00 in the morning, you're still sleep deprived. So we're never going to get rid of it as a service. I think we can help really mitigate its long-term effects with another shift. But as a company officer, if it's 2:00 in the morning and you just got woken up to go on an incident, you got to understand what's going on in your human body, all of the stuff that doesn't normally happen in normal people. And you also have to realize that cognitively and physically, you're not what you were when you came to work at 8:00 in the morning. And so I got to manage you in a way where we're going to slow things down. We're going to take more time rehabbing, recovering. Our work cycle isn't going to be as long or nearly as vigorous just because we're not in the mental, physical state to perform that way. And what happens is we wake up at 2:00 in the morning and we think that we're the same person 8:00 in the morning when we came to work, and we're not. Especially when we're making critical decisions, like you just covered, drug dosages, what's really burning here? Am I seeing what I'm really seeing? So we still have to, somebody has to come to work and be there for 24 hours, and no one's going to come to work and stay awake from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I mean, we're all going to go to sleep. And so when we wake up, we're still going to have, the company officer is going to have to manage that set of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very, very, very true. I mean, you look at the human impact, and then you have some of these departments that are doing 48.96. So now you're in, 36. Yeah, I mean, it's insane. And they use it as a badge of honor. And I don't mean to sound like a dick when I say this, but when you're advertising that, putting it front and center, that's telling the world that you really don't understand this idea at all, and it's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah, but the firefighters get together and they vote on it. So they vote on it, and they're like shooting themselves in their own foot.
100%.
It's like, and when they're doing it, it's totally emotional. They're not basing it on any data, any science. And if you've said, look at what's going on. And then I don't know if you remember Don Abbott, God rest his soul. he did a Project Mayday over a 7-8 year period of time before he died. You are like 5 times more likely to have a Mayday or get significantly injured on your second day off, your second day that you're at work. And then he has the time frames. Okay, now you're in your last 8 of your 48, and it's at night. That is when your chances of injury, maydays, everything skyrockets. So, and then a part of that too is they go to these whack schedules and they trade. So now they're working 72s, 96s in a row, and then they drive 150 miles home because they can't afford to live in their community, and they're killing themselves and other people on the highways getting home. So I mean, the whole thing is just crazy.
Yeah.
And you voted for this,
Yeah. Well, one of the studies, and I talk about this a lot because I think it's important for people to understand, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. I had a guy on the show, Joel Billings, super nice guy, was a volunteer firefighter, but only worked during the day, never did a night shift, decided to go into the research side, didn't want to be a career firefighter. And so one of his first projects, I think it was for his PhD, he studied a department that went from a 24-48 to a 48-96, the one we just talked about. And I think he studied like cortisol and a couple other things. And the result, study showed that on the second day, they were slightly less stressed, more rested of that second day of that 48. So this is a better schedule. The problem is no one, clearly people took that and ran with it, but no one actually looked at the study. The department that Joel studied ran 1 call a shift and less than 1 at night. So basically nearly always 0 at night. That was a department. And the only improvement that they saw was that second 24 of the 48. They hadn't woken up at 5 a.m. to drive that 150 miles or 4 a.m. to go to the station. So they were more rested that second day because they slept all night because they don't get any calls. You can get that benefit by changing the start time. Instead of 7 or 8, why do we start? So you make that now, it's 24/72 with an 11 a.m. noon start time. Now you wake up, you have breakfast with your kids, you take them to school, then you go to the station, you've avoided rush hour, and then the guy or girl you're relieving that just got hammered all night, now they can sleep in till 10. The rig's checked out, they're ready to go. And so now they're less sleep deprived on that journey home that you said. So when you actually look at the science of sleep medicine, 24 is pushing it. 12s aren't the answer. 24 is what we have to do in our profession. I 1,000% agree with that. But no more than 24. That's pushing it. Go have your 72. Go try and get back to baseline. But a 48-hour shift on a even moderately busy station or rig is pure insanity. And if you're beating your chest saying that you're a great firefighter and you voted for that, you are an absolutely subpar firefighter, because just as you said, you're operating at an absolutely depleted level by that point.
I'm all for the later start time. Ours was 8. I've been on fire departments, they start at 7. Now, one of the things that you could say is, okay, now it's daylight and we're going on the calls early in the morning, where you'd want to get a fresher person that didn't have a long night there earlier. But we had a union president in Phoenix he was there for the first 15 years I was on the job. He wanted us to start at 10 a.m. And the membership had a vote on it. It got voted down every single time. And the biggest thing was the morning routine with their wife and the kids. And it was going to upset, on when they got off in the morning, they had to get their kids to school. It was, but every time, and he once a year, he would try to get it through. And I yes, 10 o'clock. Well, that meant I could sleep in. I'm not in rush hour traffic. I thought it was a great thing, but.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, even with that morning, because I've had that brought up, and my thing is this: when I worked 24/48, I only saw my family 1 morning out of 3. First morning, I'm getting up at 5. They're still asleep, and I go to the station. Second morning, for me, I never got back. When I got back to the house after a 70-mile drive, my wife was at work and my kids were at school. So actually, it gives you more time to help out with the family, more time with your kid. And now it's 2 mornings out of every 4 if you've gone, 3 mornings out of every 4 if you've gone to a 24/72, instead of 1 out of 3, which is the way we do it now. So you've given someone basically 2 extra mornings per shift rotation with their family.
Yeah. Another one I'm all for. My wife was a flight nurse, so she did 12, 24-hour shifts. So it was, I'd come in, she'd leave, I wouldn't see her for 24. Yeah, so ours was really upset. But our kids always had one parent home. So
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we've been talking about sleep deprivation and recruitment for 50 minutes. So let's kind of get on to the leadership side and the managing a fire company. So as you progress through, you've obviously got this father who's being revered at that point now as far as a leader within our profession. With that influence and your own experience as you're navigating the ranks, let's start with this. What were some of the things that you were seeing as far as issues and challenges that you recognized needed to be addressed?
My dad did a lot of good things. Fire command, leadership stuff, but his biggest deal was being nice. So that was kind of his mantra. But hey, a guy's mantra that like his deal is be nice. He wasn't nice when you weren't nice. So, everybody thought he was a big, panda bear pushover. And just because his mantra was be nice doesn't mean that he wasn't going to deal with business. So, I grew up with that, and the way to treat firefighters or any work group, and he always validated himself from the people below him and not the people above him. So that always was in the impression of my mind. But so after I retired from Phoenix, I went on this blue card fire command journey, and it was critical. I mean, we lose a lot of firefighters in a hazard zone, and then we screw a lot of them up too in there. So, but if you look at really the service delivery package and the time of our 24 hours, very little of it is really spent in the hazard zone. And a lot of it is spent just managing and driving around with the people that you're in charge of. So what I saw in my travels is that firefighters are excellent problem solvers unless it's their own personal problem and they have a very difficult time with having any difficult conversation or conflict in a fire station. And so what it leads to is I want to be your friend a lot more than I want to be your boss. And they don't address issues like our workforce really needs to. I saw it in Phoenix. I see it everywhere. I think it's a universal percentage. You have the old gruffy company officers that aren't running a popularity contest, and it's ironic that they're usually the most popular. And then you have a group of people that I guess just wanted to sit in the seat and they don't want to manage anything because they don't want to be unpopular or have conflict or anything. So in managing a fire company, what we wanted to do was the soft skills that we have to use every single moment of the day, and mostly, our 80-90% EMS, correct?
Yeah.
No one ever. So this book really talks about EMS and what's going on in the customer's brain, how to deal with them, the body language, and then the post part of it. We just did CPR on grandma for 35 minutes. Our resilience after that, and then dealing with issues. So we set up scenarios to where you have to have a difficult conversation. We baby step them through the different types that they have, so that get this, we actually try to train them before we put them in the role that they're going to have to do this, instead of just putting them in there untrained. So, and the response that we've had has been really phenomenal. And it's a new program, so a lot of the seasoned officers are going through it to evaluate it. And what we get from them is, I wish I had this 10 years ago. And then when we get with the junior officers that we're doing, a lot of times that we're doing class, they get done, they got to go back to work. They come back in the morning when they get off for the second part of the class. They say, I actually used your stuff last night. So that's always really good to hear. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's one thing I've always noticed with the promotional ladder is it's officer classes, it's inboxes and scenarios and all these things, but it's not teaching leadership, and it's not teaching, as you said, even understanding the soft skills like the mental health. And we're all guilty of this. The guy that seemed pissed off back in the day, we used to push his buttons. Now we're realizing that guy needed a hug, not a poke. So, understanding as a human being, when to, of course, have to discipline or whatever you have to do on that side. But understanding the dynamic of your crew, literally, as you said, even hour by hour, depending on, how they're doing at that moment.
Yeah. And I read all the books going through the system, promoting everything. And none of it really prepared me for being a company officer. Really didn't. So I wanted to write a book. Okay, when you come through the fire station doors this morning, this is what you're getting paid to manage. And so we talk about readiness. There's like 9 chapters on getting the truck ready, drilling, chow, managing physical fitness, managing readiness. We have a sleep deprivation chapter in there. And then we move on to EMS service delivery, firefighter resilience, and then the managing human part of it. So, a lot of times, and you work for good company officers and bad ones. My favorites were the ones that very early on, when they saw me doing something out of balance, and I wanted them to do this for me, is say, knock it off. Quit doing it that way. Don't say that. And they didn't let a problem grow until they were so mad they just exploded. They very grunt, short sentences. Get on the truck. It's time to drill. Those are my favorite people to work for. So, but I see, and the more social media, the less social firefighters get, right? And they hide behind this and that. And I think we're worse than we were 20 years ago, telling somebody to knock it off. I think 20 years ago, you'd hear it 80% of the time, and now maybe 50% you're going to get lucky. So we wanted to ingrain a skill set in officers where it's your job to tell people to knock it off when you need to. So that's what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. But it's called managing a fire company. And that's the first thing. I'm leading a fire company. I'm a leader. And I go, well, you are leading 2 or 3 other people, but you got a daily set of things to manage here. So,
well, you said about that kind of tightrope between the authoritarian that you have to be sometimes and, the member of the team, the member of the crew. What are some of the principles that you bring to these young leaders to try and find balance between, the times you have to actually be the bugles that are on your shirt and the times that it's okay to be, just one of the people working out or one of the people throwing ladders or doing the dishes?
And believe me, I've had a lot of discussions along these lines. When a company officer is the first, so you join up as a firefighter, you're a driver, a paramedic. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can do before you're a company officer. But when you become a company officer, is the first position that you're in where you're in charge of anybody else. And when you're in charge of anybody else, you are a leader. You are. Those people are looking at you. So what we tell people is, what is your scope of influence? And you are a leader. But what is the leaders above you expect you to manage, right? So through my research, and he's the guy who coined the phrase emotional intelligence. God, I can't think of his name right now, but I read a Harvard Business Review 10 reviews, these little books they put together. He wrote a thing where he went into thousands of companies, data, it's all scientific based. It's not, based on personal experiences. And they identified if you're in charge of somebody else, 6 management styles. And so what we say is, here they are, here's the 6. And then we say, okay, here's the positives, factors in using this, and here are the negative factors. And then, okay, how is a company officer going to use this 1 out of 6 management styles, and how's the fire chief going to use it? So one that we just talked about is coercive, telling somebody to knock it off, and coercive is a very low-rated management style, but a company officer has to have the ability to be coercive. And the example I use is, you should only, like, okay, you're in trouble, I have to discipline you, and blah, blah, blah. And there's a process that you have to fit into if you're being officially coercive. You have to change in order to be employed here. But the example I use is, that's a bad way to manage on a daily basis, right? But I ask, like, I was in a group that had about 150 people. I says, okay, here, raise your hand if you were afraid of your dad growing up. And everyone raised their hand. And I go, okay, anybody under 40 who thinks that their dad can still take them? And half the people raise their hand. So, and my dad loved me, and he, wanted me the best for me and everything. But I think a company officer has to have that coercive, right? Your crew members have to know that if something's out of balance, you're gonna fix it. And so it's not something that you want to manage with on a day-to-day basis, being coercive to your group. But it's like growing up with your dad. You know that when you cross the line with your dad, there's something bad going to happen to you, right? So coercive was one. I'll quickly go through them. The first one is being authoritative. And that is the number 1 rated management style. And what it is people like someone in charge that has a path and a clear vision. And so we look at that. Okay, how does a company officer use that? And a fire chief? Well, a fire chief sets the policies and everything. So a company officer is kind of that for their crew, but they've got to fit into their fire chief's authoritative, right? There's democratic. Again, a fire chief is going to use that one a lot more than a company officer is. But are we going to vote to go on the next call? Hey, a difficulty breathing just came in. Who wants to go? Who doesn't want? So they're not going to be but there is some stuff that a company officer needs to be democratic with. What are we going to eat? What's the routine going to be today? This is the 5 things that we have to do. You guys tell me what order you want to do them in. So there is some stuff, but the next one's the affiliative, and that is where a company officer lives, is connecting with their crew, and it's the second highest rated management style. And so if you look at the first one, I want a boss that has good visions, and this is what we're here for. There's no gray. And then I also want somebody that cares about me. So a company officer and a fire chief doesn't get down in a 24-hour period with their crew members like the company officer does. So you got to, and the two, you got, the better you know your crew, the better you can push their buttons, the better you know if there's something going on in their life and they're not acting normally, that you can kind of head off. So that's a huge one. And then there's pace setting is another, and that's the worst management style there is, pace setting. And that's the Navy SEALs, and I expect everybody to be a Navy SEAL like me. And then the last one is being a coach. And I think that, again, it's a big one where a company officer has to do a lot of coaching, and you have to be not the best at everything on your crew, but you need to be the highest authority on your crew. So that's what we talk about, leadership and management. And here are the styles, and and they say if you can use 3 or 4 of those effectively, you get like a C or B. But if you can use all 6 styles for the situation that you're in, you're going to get an A+ as a manager. The more styles that you can use, the more effective you are. And we've all worked for bosses that have used pace setting and coercive. Those are their only 2, right? And then we work with bosses that's I'm going to be affiliative with you, I'm going to be your best friend, and they don't manage things that need to be managed. So you need a blend of all 6 of those in order to be effective.
One of the issues that I see, because I've had some incredible chiefs and captains and lieutenants in my career, and some awful ones. So I've got to see, and I work for 4 different departments on the East and the West Coast. So I got a very interesting, I always say, gypsy-like experience in the fire service. But one of the things that I'm seeing, especially when we lose so many first responders, and now we've got a recruitment crisis, is in some areas just a complete lack of moral courage from a leader. And there seems to be more value placed on their own career path than there is advocating for their people. With your lens, talk to me about that kind of person, and how can we kind of nudge them back into being courageous and actually, fighting for their men and women.
Are you talking about the senior leaders on a fire department?
Not even senior. I mean, this could be a union president. This could be, collectively firefighters. But I mean, more often than not, obviously a union leader, a chief, even, city and county, administrators.
I think company officers, the whole fire department is a product of their environment, a culture that is created, and that culture will always start at the top. So as far as the fire chiefs go, I see less and less of a commitment. When I got hired in 1980, you were a fire chief for one fire department your whole life, and then you retired and you didn't go anywhere else. There's very little lateral transfers, especially on the executive level in the fire service. And now what you see is this rotating, exactly what you described. I was a deputy chief here, and I took a fire chief job here, and I'm going to do this for 4 or 5 years, and then I'm going to go over here and be a fire chief again. Well, the lack of commitment that creates when you're drifting through, and again, I think that has, and then the tenure of years that a fire chief has on a department now. I mean, probably my dad was a fire chief in Phoenix for 28 years, and I know that's a long, unusual one. But man, was a fire chief now, 2, 3, 4 years. So and then, okay, every 4 years I got a new mission statement I got to learn, and here's this person's vision, and it keeps flipping on. So I think the more stable it is up at the top, and the more that they can do this culture, company officers have to fit into that. I mean, you're still going to have some rogues, but it's so to me, to get the company officers on board and everybody, managing people in the right way, it's got to start at the top. There's got to be stuff that they're doing, that the proof is in the pudding, that I care about the people that are working for me. So, and then if you're a company officer that are in an environment where you're in a good culture and you're still not doing what you need to do to take care of your people, well, now you're part of the problem. And I call those people cancer. You're more of a cancer than you are a cure here. And we've all seen those people throughout the service. And a lot of it's like, how long will a department tolerate somebody that's just cancerous? Hey, and I've seen, like, okay, a new fire chief comes in and I go, you're gone. And they're like, the people, the workforce gets up and applauds. Which is sad, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of factors out there that are kind of driving our work environment, and us being a product of that.
I had a guest on, and I think he was a Marine, certainly, in the War on Terror in one of the countries. And I remember him saying that there was a certain point, and it may have been Iraq, because, that was probably the less obvious of the two post 9/11. And he was like, well, we got on and we just went out on mission, and we prayed we didn't get hit with an IED. We, patrolled and took out bad guys and went back to the base. He said, and we never really seemed to move the needle. And it really made me think about my whole career, even in the good fire departments where they did have some things that progressed, but like, what was the mission statement? And, most of us, I worked at just 14, but most of us are going to work 20, 25. What did you, I mean, we save lives, but I mean, as far as proactively improving things and preventing some of these from happening, what did we actually change in 20, 25 years? Or did you just show up, put your gear on the rig, take your job seriously, respond when the tones go out, and then go home? And I've never really kind of heard a fire service leader say, here's where we need to be 10 years from now. we need to change the work week. We need to start leaning into, 911 telehealth and getting rid of some of these non-emergent calls, just things that can improve the community. Because you've got fire prevention, they do a great job. But for us, like the mission, like how is it going to improve? And I feel like that's a really kind of glaring missing piece of our profession that is demoralizing, because our men and women are just doing the same thing day in, day out.
Well, we are definitely a reactionary service. And what we're there for is we're the agency of last resort. When all of the other things in society have failed, who do they call? Us. But so, are again, like when I'm managing a fire company, I want to be a leader. I want to be a leader. Well, it's very hard for, okay, you're in charge of your 3 or 4 people, but what impact can that company officer have on the whole entire fire department, bringing it up to the next level? Or so their level of influence is, their scope is the people they're in charge of. And the higher you go up and the more people you're in charge of, the more and more positive impact you can make on those people. But as a firefighter, I don't want a lesson, and I know that, we come to work and it's the same, one tragedy after another, but we have a significant impact on our communities. And I'll tell you a little story here. And it really kind of hit home with me. And when it happened, I told myself for the first time, I had no idea what the impact I was making, just out there delivering service. So I moved over here to the east side of Phoenix about 10 years ago. That's a little bit more high rent, just a little. But I got out of the west side, and I'm at a grocery store. And it's a grocery store that is kind of a high-end gourmet one. And I was probably buying beer or something there. And I'm going up the aisle, and I turn the corner, and there's this woman pushing a cart coming at me. And she's probably about 10 years older than me, very well dressed, and she is staring at me. And like one of those unnerving stares, right? And as we're passing carts in the middle of the aisle now, she stops and she grabs my arm. And she says, "Are you a firefighter?" And I'm kind of like, is this like, are you going to serve me some sort of summons or warrant or something? And I go, "Well, I'm retired now, but I was a firefighter." And she says, "You saved me and my husband's life on I-10 at 40th Street." And she vividly says, my husband was driving. He was unconscious. His legs were broken. He had to be extricated from the car. I was next to him. You got me out. You brought me in the ambulance. You told him, kept coming back, telling me what was going on with my husband. You made sure that we were in the same ambulance. And so there's tears going down her face. And she says, "Every morning at breakfast, we thank God for you guys. Every morning we say a prayer for you." And I'm like, I said, "Yeah, I remember that call. How's your husband doing? He's okay. Well, he's got a limp and blah, blah, blah." She goes away. I don't remember that call. You know how many people I cut out of cars on Interstate 10 years working as a company officer on Ladder 11. Remember, but how many other people did I have to do that? And I walked away going, "Wow, man, I had no idea that I had that much impact on a person's life." And I don't think that we think of what we do every day. We might not remember that call, but they're going to remember us vividly for the rest of their lives. So, I mean, that's who gets to go to work every day. And you could hate the evil empire that you work for, and this should be better here. But my God, what we're making people cry 15 years later in a grocery store over it.
Yeah, no, I mean, as far as what we do, I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't. I think where there's a wasted opportunity. It's funny because I'm writing literally right before we sat down. I was finishing up the pilot for this, but I'm writing a script for television from my last book, because we have done such a terrible job as a profession of telling people what we actually do. Not only what our men and women go through, and I think that really needs to be told as well, but what does a firefighter do? I mean, how many times, in a combined system have you been told, "Oh, why is there a fire engine on my medical call?" In 2025, when we've been doing EMS since the 60s in Pittsburgh, so, or the 70s combined, at least in, Miami and LA. And so we've just done such a terrible job of educating the people what we do. And I think that's why we have problems getting finances, for example, when it comes to budgetary cuts, because they think that we sit around smoking cigars, patting the Dalmatian and playing cards when, that couldn't be further from the truth. But
we did a little of that.
Back at, you may have, we did bay hockey and some other stuff, but then you flip it on its head. We also have an amazing opportunity to be the proactive voice. Not that we are there making proactive changes. We're the ones on the end of 911 or 999 or 112 or wherever you are around the world. But if you imagine the impact, for example, if you had a bunch of firefighters saying that's exactly like you just detailed, like the freeway is where we see most of our calls. What are we going to do about driving safety? What are we going to do about improving the standards for the driving test and make it a little bit harder so our drivers have to actually learn how to navigate and therefore reduce some of these issues? We have the ability to actually be a very powerful voice. But as I've always said, we don't have a Jocko Willink. We don't have a member of our profession who's front and center in all the biggest podcasts and TV shows. And so I think that there's an opportunity, not for us day to day in the station so much, but as a profession to be like, hey, 40,000 people die every year on the roads. Hundreds of thousands are maimed. We see it. We're the ones cutting these people out of the cars. Let's push an initiative to start making the roads safer, not by putting speed bumps and signs everywhere, but educating these young people on how to actually drive, and then no disrespect to the people, we just don't teach them well. Our driving tests are a joke. So I think that's where, for me, on the mission side, we see the worst things, as you said, but most of these are preventable. How can we be one of the voices as well to also start shifting some proactive measures so that we don't cut so many people out of a car?
Well, I don't know if we're going to get drivers to drive better. I think we're there to pick up the pieces. I'm going to give that to the DMV, but I totally agree. I think that what we project are like we're wearing all this stuff and we're firefighters, and they don't see us doing the EMS, the hazmat, all the other the stuff that we do. So my dad has always been a champion of getting resource. Well, the last few years, him going to the city council, we use a thing called Fire Dept. God, what did Dept stand for? Data analysis program. Like, he really looked at this stuff, and it was always, this is how many people we need to fight a fire. How many people on average are going to experience their own house fire? It's like 1 in 100. So when we push, this is what we need, you're talking to a dead audience, aren't you? And probably if you're in a room with 300 people, maybe one person in that room has had a fire. So my dad shifted gears and he says, if your grandmother has a full code and we come in to treat her and try to revive her, this is how many people it takes. How many people are going to call 911 at the end of their life or for medical stuff? So he started presenting what we did and more of where I want to make it to where I can connect with you when I'm asking you for money or to make things better. This is what we do. And everyone here is going to call 911 for a medical call sometime in their life. So he's touching on that. And the burning babies and all of that stuff, it falls on deaf ears. And we do need to do a better job of saying, no, this is what we're here for. When grandma dies, we need 4 people in that room to try to save her life. This is what they're going to do. We need people to get her to the hospital. We need, and it's not based on a house fire that they're never going to have,
Yeah, absolutely. I know your dad was, again, known for using the phrase customer service. And I think, really at that also circles back round to kindness and compassion, and again, if you've got the workforce that you actually wanted to hire and you've got fitness standards and you've got, like you said, the staffing that you need, then, the delivery of service is ultimately great human beings in uniform doing what they do. And I think it's that kindness and compassion that we're not seeing. And even with this younger generation, when, there's a lot of people on Instagram filming themselves, with 2-3 years on, with a big mustache and a helmet and leaning on a pike pole in front of a burnt out house that they didn't save. And that's not what we do, and certainly didn't do that point.
It's not.
With the other 95%, like you said, and I wrote this in my first book. One of the most rewarding things that we ever did on Truck One in Anaheim was the back to bed calls, because there's nothing more rewarding than going to a home of an elderly couple. The wife's on the floor. She soiled herself. The husband is looking there and he's heartbroken because he was once a burly man and now he's frail and he can't pick up the love of his life. And we walk in, we pick her up, we clean her up, we change her clothes, and we put her back to bed. No one's going to make a movie about that, but that's some of the most beautiful, heroic stuff that happens in EMS agencies and fire and law enforcement. That's what we've got to do, is tell the whole story of what we do. But we're so attached to this ego element of, I'm a salty firefighter, in a profession where things don't burn very much anymore. And that's a great thing. That's a testament to building codes and fire prevention. But be proud of all the other things we do, because like you said, we do an amazing job, but we've got to tell the fucking story of what we do. Otherwise, as you said, you go to a room of politicians, you ask for a budget that's justified, that you need, and they stare at you and going, well, why do you need that? You guys barely do anything. You get cats out of trees.
Yeah. But I totally agree with you. Getting Mrs. Smith off the ground and back into bed, for us to discount that. And then the burly guy, that his whole identity is like, okay, we're going to go on 100 calls, and we're going to use your identity on 2 of them. What good are you on the other 98 when you don't give the people? This is what we're here for. And my dad is, everything he did, it was he based it on the service that we're delivering. It wasn't egos or traditions. It was, we have to do, and that's what a company officer needs to do, is manage the daily routine on the service that we're delivering to our customers, which is the community.
Yeah.
The service, that word, it comes from serve. And if you're not here to serve your community, you're a cancer. And I couldn't stand going to work with those people where every call was an inconvenience to them. No, it's not. We are making an impact in these people's lives and getting paid for it. I mean, you picked the wrong, like, we need postal workers. We need meat packers.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I've got a couple other things, and then we'll go to some closing questions. But firstly, you touched on cell phones, and it's an interesting time because in fire stations, when they're building them now, they're doing individual dorms. And from a sleep point of view, that is fantastic. I've always said it's insanity to wake up an entire station of people, especially in a large station, for, let's say, rescue. Two firefighters go on that call and 8 firefighters wake up for it. It's crazy. But obviously now that really creates a problem, because people go into their own individual bunks, and now you've got this device that people are just kind of drawn to, and it kind of fractures the firehouse then. So from that lens, you've got this younger generation, they are raised with these screens now. And even, let's be honest, a lot of us, older ones are also using these same devices. What are you telling these leaders as far as, bringing that community back to the firehouse and not letting it stay fractured, especially, God forbid, after COVID, where they were told not to eat and sit together?
Well, concurrent theme throughout the book and what we teach is lead by example. And if you go to fire stations, a lot of the times when that is going on, the company officer is the one back in their room isolating themselves and setting that example. And then another thing that really, and I don't know if you mentioned, it was COVID, right? That put it on steroids. But to me, it's the company officer has to get out of their office. They have to create an environment where they have activities that require everybody on deck and involved. But it's a 24-hour shift, so there are going to be periods where, okay, we're done hanging out, let's just all go to our I think it's good to have that safe place where somebody can go and have a private conversation with their spouse or take a nap and not. But I'm totally agree with you, we're not all going to hang out in our bunks all day. I think the company officer has to be the first one to take the initiative of getting out of their bunk and doing stuff and creating the opportunities for group activities. So it all starts there. But if the company officer is the one back there looking at their phone or running their business or whatever, I mean, it's not going to be good for anybody else.
There's no question that the firehouses that have been cohesive that I worked through my career, there was a strong element of working out together, of training together, of eating together. And so whether it's an actual shared suffering thing like a CrossFit workout or simply preparing a meal and breaking bread, that I think is such an important part of firehouse culture. And like you say, you don't have to be, together all the time, but like Anaheim, I remember we used to watch Dexter every week. That was one of the firehouse thing. We used to go together and do the UFC pay-per-view, and of course TiVo it because we get like 12 calls during it. But all those, and it wasn't all day every day. It was just these little pockets of hours here and there where we came together, and it worked. I mean, some of the men I worked with Anaheim came to my wedding. We're still close friends. We're talking almost 20 years now since I worked there, so it's crazy.
Our routine was the same thing. We get together, get in the morning, the trucks, the station, and then we had a PT thing. We'd go out and drill, and we would hang out pretty much the whole morning. And after lunch, everything's cleaned up. Is from lunch till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon was everybody's time. Like Andy and Opie were on. Some people are there. Another one in my day was Bob Ross, Painting with Bob Ross.
Love that guy.
I mean, he came on at 1 p.m. and like by 1:15, you were sawing logs watching Bob, right? Uh-oh, you froze up there, James. So, and then we got back together about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And that took us to where we all went to bed. So, I don't know. It was all kind of, and another thing too is firefighters like a structure, right? They kind of like coming to work and having a routine, and that was kind of the routine with, like you say, the 12 calls that were going to interrupt the routine that we were trying to have every shift.
Yeah.
But again, like workout time, like somebody would be in the middle of a bench press. Oh my God, this call is ruining my workout. That's why we're here, okay? I have to do another warm up before I can get to my peak.
Yeah. I always went into my workouts going, I may not finish this. And it's funny that I would honestly say 90% of the workouts that I started, I finished. And if I hadn't done it because, what if I get a call? I would be so much weaker and less fit. So, if you get a call, and sometimes it was a kind of a, red line workout and you're drenched in sweat, but it is what it is. I mean, you're a big boy and girl. You can run the call sweaty and tired and you're going to be just fine. So, but yeah, I mean, getting angry about it, sometimes, Murphy's Law, every time you touch, the exercise equipment, the tones are going to go off. And maybe those days you go, all right, I'm just going to go for a walk around the station tonight. At least we'll do that.
Yeah, or jump rope or something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you come to work thinking that you're going to watch the entire Super Bowl, you really are living in a dream world, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
And then I think a company officer has to set that tone in the station. We're here for calls, right? And I don't want to hear any belly aching on the way to a call that we're getting paid to go on.
Absolutely. Well, I want to hit one more area because that's so pertinent. We've talked about different positions and different kind of leadership styles and philosophies. But as I touched on earlier, old James, my crews, when someone was seeming like they were kind of getting a little salty, we'd like a pack of hyenas and we start pushing the buttons and it was a game. And then now, the last 10 years, we're like, oh, okay, yeah, they were probably going through some stuff. So what do you tell these leaders as far as identifying, as you said, sometimes we have good days, sometimes we have bad days. Like when you start seeing that coworker, that firefighter, whoever it is, not themselves, not seeming the same way with this 2025 lens, and taking all the tools that we've learned, all the things that Tim talks about, and looking at it as like, let me not push their buttons, let me figure out what's going on, let me take them aside.
Well, I think it's important to know when that it's okay to push their buttons to try to get the most out of them than when it's not okay and there's something going on with them. But firefighters we're expert at pushing buttons, right? And part of the button pushing thing is you got to know somebody really well in order to push their buttons. So, and that brings us back to the affiliative management style, where a company officer really has to know their crew, and that's facilitating eating with them, cooking meals, knowing who they're married to, if they have kids, what's going on in their life. So, if they start withdrawing, if they start their uh, hygiene habits aren't what they used to be, they're getting to work later, uh, they get angry quicker. Things that used to not bother them are bothering them. I mean, we know those people well enough where those have to be warning signs for us to and listen, I don't. One of the things I hear is like, okay, you're trying to turn a company officer into a counselor, and no, I'm not. But if you're going to get paid to manage a fire company, there's a certain set of things that a company officer has to be aware of and to manage, and it's just part of being a company officer. And one of those is seeing changes in your crew members. And that's going to happen a lot in our service because we work in one of the most stressful environments that are out there. So we have to be acutely aware of that. We have to engage. We have to make sure that they're eating and hydrating the way they need to. We talked about it through the whole podcast, James, is we have to make sure that they're exercising and get all this bad stuff out of them. But there's going to be a time maybe where we also have to have a private conversation with them and hand them a business card with the counselor's name and saying, hey, you need to talk to this person. It's beyond me, right? So just a company officer has to be acutely aware. And I worked with basically the same crew for about 10 years, the same two engineers, definitely. But now I had a senior firefighter for 6 or 7 years. I knew when something was going on with them. And the earlier that you see it and say, hey, what's going on with you, the easier it is to fix. But I have been traveling around with this. A lot of times they bring us in is because they had a firefighter suicide. And what you hear all the time, hey, this guy, they said he was showing us all the signs. We saw it coming and we didn't do anything about it. I mean, how often if you're seeing the signs, I get it like out of nowhere, this person, commit suicide where there are no signs. I'm sure that's going to happen. But this was going on 2-3 years. You saw the downfall of this person and you didn't try to intervene. And this is a question I asked when that happened. Would that person would have committed suicide if they didn't become a firefighter? And I'm going to say 99% of the time, no, they would have never done that if they wouldn't have become a firefighter. So it's our job. It's us. That has to be in our wheelhouse to see that and prevent stuff like that from happening. So,
what about same kind of question?
Your question?
No, you did. What about though? Because this is, I would argue, the most stigma. There's less stigma around alcohol use and when they're coming in and they're smelling of it and all that kind of thing. But the most stigma I see is drug use, illicit drug use. But these are all parts of the same exact conversation. There's a mental health crisis going on. So what do you tell the company officers and or just the firefighters? You suspect there's some sort of drug use going on. You suspect this person's struggling, but it's not just a straight, we're worried about suicide conversation. Now, it's a slightly different conversation needs to be had.
What drug?
I mean, pick one.
Well, as marijuana gets more and more acceptable across the country, I think that's probably even a better alternative than alcohol if you're going to pick which one does more damage to you. But if you're looking at like methamphetamines, high-end drugs like that, where you're really trying to escape reality, then they have some issues. should I tell this story? I work for this company officer, and I work for both the ones I'm going to talk about. I'm at one of his funeral. He was the engine captain at my station for about 5 years. He died of cancer. But I'm at his funeral, and one of my earlier captains, when I was a firefighter, was there, and he came up to me at the end of the thing, and he says, "I went to your dad's funeral, and I want to talk to you, but uh, there was a crowd around you." He says, "So I got to tell you, your dad saved my life." He says, "I was addicted to cocaine and amphetamines. I was a sex addict," and he says, "I was this close to committing suicide. And I saw your dad, and your dad was patient with me, and he kept saying, 'Joe, we got to get you fixed. We got to get you fixed.' And he finally put me in a 12-step program. And he said that saved my life." So he was thinking, tears are running down. And the stuff that Joe saw through his career and the dead people that we worked on. I mean, Joe was just stressed out. He got divorced. All this stuff was going on in his life. So my dad looked at that as you're taking all of, when we hired you, you were the best person on the planet. But now here 15 years later, you're a stressed out person that we need to help you get back to your baseline. And it's because of this job, right? So that's my first response is, let's try to help them get better. I mean, we're kind of responsible for them getting this way. Why don't we get them better so that they can live the rest of their life without having to put a gun in their mouth? So that's the way I look at them. I know a lot of other people, like if you fail a drug test, you're out of here. They don't take any accountability in it, and like you're left on an island. So I don't know. Like to me, if I had a member coming in hungover all the time, and this is a result of stress, and we need to get you some help, or because it's going to lead down the worst road. Did I answer your question, James? About, I don't know.
Yeah, no, you did 100%. I think that's just it. And you literally used the analogy that I do. If you have someone, whether it's the salty guy, whether it's someone who's coming in hungover, whatever it is, and from day one they were an absolute turd, then that's a different conversation. But just like you said, all these bright-eyed firefighters that towed the line on that first day that were, incredible, average, whatever. They were good firefighters for all those years. And now 10, 15 years they're going through this stuff. Of course, the job is a part of it. I mean, I talk about childhood trauma, all these other things too. There are other compounding elements, of course, but there's a vicious cycle. And going back to the sleep deprivation, you've got the sleep deprivation, you've got the toxic leadership, the organizational betrayal, the breakdowns in relationships because we're never home, the side effects of alcohol because you're not sleeping properly. The list goes on and on and on. But many of those are preventable, and many of those are job related, especially this generation that we're talking about, the last, 50 years really, when EMS really start taking off. So yeah, of course, the job is a massive part of this. So I agree with you 1,000%. We owe it to that person to try and get them the help, go through, hopefully they got a good union and they've got direct links to places where they can go to, sobriety and addiction counseling and mental health counseling. But, why would you discard someone who you, as you said, you thought was the perfect fit for your department just because they had the audacity to start struggling?
Yeah, it's not fair to that. And like I said, would this happen to you if you never took this job? And I think most of the time it wouldn't have. It's the job that creates the stress and all the. And Tim Deese calls it your backpack. You throw stuff in your backpack and it gets full, and then it tears, and then stuff starts coming out of it that they never dealt with. They just kept throwing it in their backpack. And we talked about earlier, our service attracts those people that are comfortable in chaos. So they come with a backpack that's half full.
Absolutely.
And then we fill the other half, and we go, "Oh, it was your childhood." Well, it was a combination of both, But me, I did 24 years out in the field, and there was a call that I went on, and kids, freeway, the whole 9 yards. And like going back to the station, I said, my backpack, I ain't going on another EMS call. I don't want to throw another that's my last one. So it was just full. It's going to happen to everybody that's in it long enough. So
I had a great leader, Terry, my captain in Anaheim, and we had a horrendous wreck. I wrote about it in my first book, but a little, I think she was basically about 3 years old, was decapitated in a wreck, and she was still pinned in. It was obviously a fatality. We worked the wreck. The driver was actually okay. The passenger was killed, and so we clear the scene. We're going to go back and extricate the child when PD are done and the coroner's ready for us. And we're young firefighters, myself and my partner, and we're getting ready. We get toned out. We're getting ready to go, and Terry DFOs us. He's like, "You are not coming with us." And we're of course like embarrassed. I'm like, "No, no, no, we'll be fine. We'll be fine."
mhm.
He goes, "You are gonna see so much horrible shit in your life. You don't need to add this to the list." He and the engineer were getting ready to retire shortly after, and I thought that was such incredible leadership. Because would we have been okay? Probably. But did we need to be there when really you just need one person on the spreaders? No, we didn't. And I've said the same thing even as a medic. If you go in and it's, you're just seeing if it's obvious signs of death, does the whole crew need to go in? No, they don't. And I've, there's no medal for seeing the most horrible shit. So even with that backpack, as a leader, can you mitigate how many of these things that your crew sees? And I thought that was such a powerful lesson from a true servant leader that I work with.
Yeah. And I talk about that in the book. If you know you're going on a dead person, minimize, because every dead person that we go on, a little pebble we throw back in there, any pebble that you can prevent from going into someone's backpack, prevent it. Yeah. And then when you're young, I mean, it's empty, right? Yeah, a lot of room in here, right? It's when you get older and it starts filling up, it's.
This is getting heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And it's going to happen. I mean, and hopefully that you're resilient enough where you can carry a lot of that. But some people just come with it's half full when they get here, and we hire a lot of people from the military. I mean, we're actually kidding ourselves if we don't realize that they've got some stuff and that we need to do some stuff to help them keep their resiliency going.
Yeah, especially this
And
generation.
the more that you feel like your organization cares about you, the less those pebbles are smaller and smaller because you're in good company.
Yeah,
They got my back.
absolutely. And even like you said, the tools, everything from nutrition to sleep through to mindfulness and counseling, and even the psychedelics and things that people are realizing are working. There are so many tools that you can use to turn those struggles into
Mhm.
strengths. I truly believe that post-traumatic growth, the hope of that is what we should be talking about. You had these things happen. It's going to make you a great first responder, but you can't bury them. You've got to address them, and then
Mhm.
you'll be more compassionate and empathetic on scene. You have this diverse background. You grew up in the streets here or in a domestic abuse home there, and that's going to be an asset as you help these people, but only if you deal with it. And I think that's the thing. Again, going back to this younger generation, you are going to see them do this horrible stuff, but we are going to give you all the tools to stay in great physical health, to work on the mental health, and so that when you go home, you're not, your family aren't walking on eggshells. That you can walk through the door and be a loving mother or father, and enjoy those 72 hours with your family.
Exactly. Instead of just going to a bar and hanging out with your coworkers who identify exactly what you went through, and I just feel like this is a safer environment. Blah blah blah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. All very different, interesting perspectives when it comes to leadership. For people listening, let's firstly let them know where they can find the course and the book.
Managing a fire company. I know it's a long web address, but that's it. Managingafirecompany.com. It'll take you to our homepage. We have an online training program. We have an instructor training program, and we actually certify people as a managing a fire company. So it's a kind of a broad program that all starts with a textbook at managingafirecompany.com. We launched it about a year ago. It's really kind of taken off. I think every fire department wants to do officer development. And I think they're seeing that this is actually works, and it's something that, so we've gotten really good reviews, and it's, I taught a lot of incident command classes, and it's really fun to see people's competency run those incidents, but going to these and have them come back and saying, I used your stuff and it worked, and thank you so much. I don't know what I mean, I don't know, the impact that I'm hearing is just a lot more satisfying.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's a massive void that we've identified, is we've got to teach people how, the human skills of how to actually lead, not just simply, have the classes that will allow you to step up the ladder.
And I appreciate the opportunity, James, coming on and talking about all that good stuff. So, I ask a question. Who do you think is more important in the fire department, the fire chief or the company officer?
Oh, the company officer. I mean, like you said, the culture is set from the top, but who do most of us interact with every day? The company officer. So hopefully the company officer has got a good relationship with the chief, so then it just filters down.
Yeah, hopefully you have a good chief. Yeah, that helps the company officer be even better. So
absolutely. Well, that was your book. I just want to throw a couple of closing questions at you. The first one I love to ask, is there a book or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
Well, my favorite book is the book Dune. But Primal Leadership talks about emotional intelligence here. And if I can't, it's a doctor. Yeah, Primal Leadership. I think it's really a good read.
I'll look it up as you talk.
That's where I got the 6 forms of leadership, management styles, and 2, they looked at successful companies and they thought it would be like really smart people, and they went to college, and it wasn't. After interviewing thousands of these excellent managers, it was because they had emotional intelligence and they knew how to treat people and get the most out of them. So I think Primal Leadership really talks about those. And what it does, it reminds me of, when I read it, of my dad and how he managed people. So that's my book that I would recommend for a firefighter.
So Daniel Goleman.
And just for entertainment, read Dune.
Daniel Goleman, is that right? Primal Leadership?
Yes, yes, that's it. Dr. Daniel Goleman.
Okay. Now, you just opened up another thing quickly. We're talking about leadership. We're talking about, obviously, the promotional element. One thing that's been kind of interesting, again, staying at the firefighter level my whole career, but watching these people that go through these promotional processes and then the prerequisites, is this necessity to have a college degree to promote. Having a college degree myself, and arguably there not being a lot of real world application. I have mine in exercise physiology, so at least it's a pseudo real degree. I really question the validity of a degree as far as the ability to be a good leader in a promotional journey of a firefighter. What is your perspective on that?
I agree with that. And it's not because I have a PhD, a public high school diploma, but I never had one. But I don't want to say that I'm against people having degrees. And I get what you're saying. You have to have a degree in order to get promoted battalion chief. And my degree is in archaeology, where it really doesn't apply to that service. But the more, and if you just look at somebody going through the academy and like a 6-year course, they ought to get a bachelor's degree in fire service application or something, because all the training, I mean, it ends up being more than what somebody going to college does. But my dad was a big fan of education, and he had a study one time, though. If you look at police officers, it doesn't matter what their degree is in. If you have a bachelor's degree, you're 50% less likely to get a violence complaint against you, excessive force. If you have a master's degree, you're 90% less likely to get excessive force complaint against you, and it doesn't apply to law enforcement, but my logic and decision making is influenced by how the higher my intelligence is. But for a firefighter, colleges just don't offer us the stuff that other occupations have. I mean, so to me, it does. Uh, can you? But here's another question: are leaders born, or can they be educated to where if I do go to fire shift leadership college, they'll actually graduate and be more of an effective leader for it? Or did I bring that skill set in just by the way I was raised, by my parents, and like natural? What do you think? Can you be educated to be a better leader, or is it more of an ingrained?
Well, I can tell you that I watched a group of local battalion chiefs go through Jocko Willink's muster, and that is a great leadership program. And then I watched nothing change, and most of those actually left that department. So inspiration certainly doesn't equal action, that's for sure.
Mhm.
But just going back to what you said, I think the problem is we don't have a good degree. The one people say is what, public safety or whatever it is. But when you think about a degree, I think we should have a degree that has, rope rescue and trench and, all these things are applicable, and,
Uh-huh.
pediatric airways. And now you have an actionable degree. And then if you're then going to go up to like the leadership side, then why are we not using, like you said, emotional intelligence and all these great leadership things? And then there's a didactic portion where you're forced to actually use it. And that, I think, then can train a leader and put you in environments where it's okay to fail, and you regroup and you redo it until you start getting it right. But when you look at the academic level in our, or track in our profession, it doesn't pertain to what we do. It's so academic and theoretical. And therefore these people, I mean, because we see it, how many people do we know that race up the promotional ladder that couldn't lead their way out of a wet paper bag? So, the proof is in the pudding.
Well, and a lot of it is having difficult conversations. So, what we do is classroom, we talk about it, here are the structures and algorithm on how to have this, and then we break out and we take 4 chairs and we put them like you're in an engine company. And okay, you're the student here. You're in the company officer seat, and you got to tell me to slow down and stop. And here's a kid. He's 25 years old. He's never been in that seat before. He goes, "Well, how do I say that? Tell me to slow down." And okay, you got 3 seconds, or I'm going to run the light and I'm going to hit something. 1, 2, 3, and like, boom. Okay, let's try it again. Tell me to slow down and stop. 1, stop. It takes them 10 times before they go, stop, and it's okay. So I think there are a way to develop those skills on being decisive and, addressing things. The other one is, okay, so we got done with this one. And then when we get back to the station, you have to talk to me, right? Hey, I don't like telling people to slow down. Our life's in your hands. Please don't make me do it again. But you got to have this little conversation before you go back in the station. They're stuttering and they're like shaking. I've never had a conversation like this before. Well, when's the worst time to have it? In real life, let's practice these so that you get a routine. Oh, and then we build up to where, we're a firefighter, right? We start acting like assholes. Okay. So what asshole move am I making? Am I denial? Am I deflecting? Am I discrediting you? So that they get a routine. Oh, I know what you're saying. Like, how do I respond to that? But we're actually trying to train them on how to do it before they have to do it for the first time.
I love that. I think another one, when I think back, and it's funny because in the academy, you always get those guys screaming at you and, the baby's dying, all that stuff. And then you work with them in real life a few years later. You're like, oh, you're actually not a very good firefighter. But the ones that are screaming, and I think, but in parenting terms, if you are always screaming at your child, when they do something that actually requires them to really listen, you have no other mode, you have no other gear. But if you're normally calm and you normally talk your way through these scenarios, whether you're a parent or in a fire station, then you raise your voice and you say stop, that engineer is going to slam on the brakes because you don't normally raise your voice. So I think, that's something that I've seen as, as the firefighter still is the best leaders were always calm. And when they raised their voice, they were like, you were like, oh shit, we really screwed up if he's raising his voice.
The first shift, I had a fire station. My company officer grabs me, takes me into my rack that I had made, and he tells me that my bed's made wrong. We go out on a car accident intersection where this car got clipped and it like spun around 3 times, and there's 2 adults that have been ejected. He loses his mind. And okay, you care more about my bed being made and how well it is, and you're totally incompetent when there's any kind of stress or pressure out here. It kind of like you lose a lot of respect for people like that. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You're really worried about the wrong thing here, pal. Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's just that they're so incompetent that they worry about the bed or your uniform or the station being clean because they can't manage anything past that.
Yeah, well, humility, I think, is an area where I see, the best leaders. I mean, I had Al Benjamin on the show, who's a legend in Rescue One, and he was always a firefighter,
Mhm.
senior firefighter. And you talk to Al now. Another example is Peter Park, who's a renowned strength and conditioning coach. And Peter kept asking me, James, how would you train this person? And I am not. I'm a weekend warrior strength coach at best. But that's what you see with these good leaders. They never stop learning. They're humble. Yeah, if you step out of line, they'll put you in the place, but they're not shaming the rookie. They're bringing them over and saying, all right, let me show you something. That is a good leader.
Well, and you just said something. I have never met a lifelong learner that I didn't like. There's just something about that person that when they're always reading or trying to learn, there's just something that attracts me to that type of individual. So,
absolutely. All right. Well, speaking of learning, we talked about books. What about documentaries or films that you love?
A documentary that my wife and I just watched it again. It's about, and I forget what they call it, but they made a movie out of it. But Disney did a documentary, and I think the 2 of them kind of were side by side. It's when they went to Thailand and they rescued the soccer team,
in the cave.
kids out of the caves. And it was a documentary where they actually had the divers that went in there and rescued them. And the lead guy was a retired London firefighter that was a cave diver on his days off. And I don't know, just watching that process, it was just and totally different than what we do, but I mean, it was still the service part of it. I thought that was a phenomenal documentary. And then, hey, I know it's been out for a while, but I just watched it. I'm not a very big TV person. Maverick, Top Gun Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was cool, except my daughter is a aerospace engineer, and she says you can't eject when you're going Mach 10. Your head is just going to explode. So,
yeah, we just lost Val Kilmer too. It was a shame because he looked very ill in that film. But yeah, he just passed away.
I'm glad he made it in it though.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, speaking of amazing people, is there a person that you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
God, you already had him, Tim Dietz. To me, that guy is just a rock star. What he brings to the fire service and the simple tools that he can give a company officer to do their job better without having to go to 4 years of counseling school. But other than that, another superstar that I've been dealing with is the fire chief out of Oklahoma City, Richard Kelly. And he was like a 2-year firefighter when the Oklahoma bombing happened. And he was personally responsible for rescuing or assisting rescuing like 16 of the people that they pulled out that were alive. And then he did several body recoveries. But he is a really interesting individual, and he's moved himself in the fire chief. So based on the Oklahoma thing, we've been talked about what can you do to improve. That event started them out doing a lot of stuff a lot earlier than our service is doing today. So having them involved in the managing a fire company process he was way ahead of the ball game. even Tim's curve, where he came into the thing. Oklahoma City was doing a lot more, so he'd be a great guest.
Yeah, I would love to get him on if you're able to help me connect. That'd be incredible.
Yeah, I'll send him a text as soon as we're done.
Beautiful. Yeah, I had Chris Fields on, who was another firefighter. And he was a lieutenant by that point, I think. But he was in that tragically iconic picture where he's holding the dead child, and that haunted him for years. He had his massive downward spiral, and then again, incredible post-traumatic growth journey, and even his marriage. His wife was forgiving him. He did a lot of bad stuff, and they are still bound tightly now to this day. They're a beautiful couple.
I've seen him, and he's phenomenal. Another one is he became a doctor after the Charleston Nine.
David Griffin.
David Griffin.
Yep.
Yeah. Have you had him on the show?
Yeah, he's been on, and actually we were just talking, funnily enough, going back to the 2472, I did a Zoom call with all their chiefs because they were looking at it, and they didn't actually put it into place because they just had a contract very shortly after. But hopefully the next time they all get around the table, they're gonna go to that. But yeah, I mean, I've been to their memorial station next to the site and everything, and yeah, I mean, you talk about, again, humility, like just starting from scratch as a fire department and rebuilding it. I mean, David and some of the other guys, Travis House, I mean, they've all got these powerful perspectives of that day and what they're doing now. So yeah, very powerful.
But he wrote a book, Post Traumatic Growth. I mean, so he'd be fit right up into your topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but what I'm actually doing now is people have had on the show before, like David, because he's been on, trying to get people on together. So maybe down the road, get you and Tim together, and we'll do another episode.
Oh wow,
that's an interesting dynamic. Then they bounce off each other, and I can just sit back.
Yeah, I'll let Tim do most of the talking. Another one of my fire service heroes that I thought had a huge impact, still having it, is Dan Madrikowski from Underwriter Laboratories Fire Research. He is a phenomenal human being.
I don't know if Lionel Crowther has told me about some people from UL, and I think Dan's name was one that came up recently as far as getting.
Steve Kerber is the director, but Dan is kind of the brains of and I don't want to take away anything from it, but Dan trained Steve Kerber when he was working at the government agency NIST. So Dan came from NIST, and he trained all of these thermodynamic engineers, and then they went off to UL and other places. ATF, or another group that he's trained and worked with. So he is really kind of a giant among that whole group. And he is just the nicest human being on the planet. I think he's married. He's got like 6 daughters. So he's got one of those, vans that have like the softball team shows up at the grocery store. Yeah.
My brother's got one of them because he had a little boy and they wanted one more child, and they had triplets. So they've got 4 kids now.
Surprise, honey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the very last question before we make sure everyone knows where to find you. What do you do to decompress?
Well, I got out a blue card. Another thing I started doing 5 years ago, I started playing the drums. And, I'm semi-retired, so that really has helped me keep busy, decompress. Another thing, it's math and a bunch of other stuff, so it helps my brain not think about anything else. I don't know if you play an instrument or anything, but it's hard to think about human tragedy when you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4 over and over again.
Yeah.
But I love hanging out with my family. My favorite time on the planet is I have 2 daughters, is when my wife and 2 daughters are sitting at the same dinner table, the lunch table, whatever it is, talking, hanging out. So walking the dogs. I'm pretty boring, James. Pretty boring guy. I don't jump off of cliffs with some weird suit on, or scuba dive. Or
speaking of that, just before we do, the transition is a place that can be very jarring for our men and women, because you have had this amazing career. obviously you've accumulated stuff, but also there's that tribe that you've been a part of. There's that sense of purpose. It's very hard not to identify as a firefighter specifically as a profession. And then, one day you're not, and the doors have closed behind you and your ID doesn't work anymore. And, there's another warm body in the seat that you were in before. What was your personal experience transitioning out initially?
I said to myself, why didn't you retire earlier? I know I stay connected in the fire service, developing a program and hanging out with firefighters and still training them. But to me, man, it was I didn't know it could be this good. I've heard stories about what you referenced. My whole identity is wrapped up in this, and now that I'm gone, I've kind of lost contact. That wasn't my case. I loved it, and I talked to a guy that, and you're familiar with the drop program.
Yes.
Well, they extended the drop, and he did 35 years, and then he dropped for 5, and then they extended it for 2.5, and then he just retired. And I said, "How's it going?" He says, "Man, I'm so stupid." He said, "This is so good that I should have done it like 20 years ago." And I go, "Exactly. Now you're gonna enjoy 5 years and die." But to me, retirement has been the best thing in the world. And my kids were still young. I retired young, so they were still in grade school, high school. So I got to spend a lot more time with them earlier on than I would have if I was still in the fire service. So I love it. How about you? I mean, you're out of it. Is it?
Yeah, my path is a little different. It wasn't a retirement. It was trying to fix the last place and realizing that I wasn't going to do it from within, and taking a leap of faith and doing this full time. So I didn't anticipate being out so soon. But just like you said, you have in that particular case a very toxic environment, and then you just pull the plug. You say, screw it, I'm doing it. And in my case, I cashed out. I took the lump sum and gave myself a salary for 1.5 years so I could get this up and running and really, hopefully get sponsorship so I could pay the bills, which did happen at the right time. But it was like, wow, just lying in my bed, knowing that there were no tones was amazing. Mm-hmm. Being there every morning, making my son's lunch. I used to walk him to the bus, and then it became, being in the passenger seat while he drove himself to high school. And then he's driving off to high school. All those, I didn't miss a morning with him, so, you hear people, I've said this, like so many departments, they fight tooth and nail. They'll go to arbitration, all kinds of stuff. The contract negotiations will last 3 years and they're fighting for 50 cents or $1 pay raise. And I always tell them the only currency that's really valuable is time with your family. So whether you're fighting for a better work week or whether you're considering retiring early, like this is, like you said, you don't start. And this is the thing I think people forget. That doesn't mean you're not serving anymore. I'm serving doing this. I'm serving writing books. You're serving with the training that you're doing, empowering the next generation. So you can serve in 1,000 different ways, but being, doing what we did, it is a young man's game or young woman's game. And that there will be someone filling that seat the day you leave. Don't fool yourself. So pick a point where you're like, all right, that's enough. And especially if you've got kids, don't miss their childhood and you retire and they're already off to college, because it's too late then. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. The guys and women that hang on for dear life chasing that dollar amount are usually the ones that we see die within 5 years.
I think the average lifespan of a firefighter after they retire is 11 years.
Yeah,
I've already heard, beat that.
Yeah, I've heard only 5 or 6 by most of the people that we die. I think the 11 years we die 11 years younger than the average person.
Oh, maybe.
But if you think about that, the people standing on the diamond on day one are arguably a lot fitter and healthier and mentally resilient than the average person. So we should be living a lot longer than the average person. So yeah, you are doing very well. You're smashing it. But you made the right choice.
I was 44. I mean, that's young.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's been almost 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing. People have got to be like, be the person that the city hates because you're still alive. My granddad worked for an insurance company in England, and I remember when he told me he'd been retired longer than he'd worked. That was a good day for him.
I want to go beyond that, James. I want to, when I die, said this person had collected a pension from the fire department longer than any other human being has ever. Like 50 years, he was retired. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's totally doable. This is what I've said recently with people. Our generation, I'm a little bit younger than you, but there's that element of, you're 40 years old now. So yeah, of course I'm on blood pressure meds and I'm 40. And it's like, we've got this skewed, lens of what old is. And you look around, like how many people do you see all over the place that are living late 90s, early hundreds, like loads of people. So that's completely doable, getting to, 94 and then beyond.
Well, do you ever like go to a firefighter thing, being retired for like 15 years and now everyone's old? All they come up and they go, "Hey, this is what's wrong with me. This is what's wrong." And I feel terrible for them. But on the other side of it, I don't take any prescription meds for anything. My blood pressure is still low. I'm like, thank you, God. But they're falling to pieces.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing that's crazy too. I touched on this when I did that talk for the 24/72 fire service statistics. I asked people, how many people have we lost, to suicides this last year? Well, let me show you. The National Fallen Firefighters says it's this amount, like 70 or whatever it was. So I know I can name 70 people that we probably lost in the state of Florida. That was the ones that we actually know about, not the ones that were hidden because of the stigma and the shame. So that's one state. Times that by 50. And then I always ask them, like, well, what population is not represented? The retirees. There's no VA for the fire service. So what fraction of a percent of the line of duty ones compared to the ones that transitioned out, that get into their 50s and 60s and are alone in that apartment? And they're not counted, So this is what's so sad. If we knew those statistics, I think it would be terrifying and it would really jar everyone. But it's behind a curtain. But if you could see the impact on our retirees and how short they live and actually annotate it, and then that would be such a huge selling point then for we need to change it because, like you said, our generation aren't living very long. This next generation hopefully will be like you, where they'll be living 30, 40, 50 years after retirement, and good for them.
Oh, yeah, the suicide rate is, Dietz thinks it's about 50-50, active versus retirees. And I totally agree that they're not looking at the numbers, or this was a suicide that they called something else. He ran into a fire chief where he goes, there are two of them in 6 months on their department. One was a fall injury and the other one was a hunting accident. And the fall injury was a guy that got on a ladder, hung himself, and kicked the ladder off. And the hunting accident was he shot himself in the head with a deer rifle in his bedroom. So how do you, and it's just like that. It's like, it's a reflection on the whole organization where they try to go, oh, this was, or they were going 110 miles an hour when they mysteriously hit the underpass, median, right?
Single vehicle accident. How many of those?
Yeah.
Suicides.
So we have no idea what the real number is on suicides.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. For people listening, let's just reiterate where they can find Managing a Fire Company, and are there any other places that they can reach out to you personally?
ManagingAFireCompany.com. It's got an info, info at Managing Fire. It's an email. That's what I'm trying to get to. If you click on that, I'm CC'd on that along with my office manager. So it's probably the best way to get a hold of me is through the website. And then too, if you go there, it's really just one big page with a bunch of buttons you can click on and have PDFs to kind of explain the whole thing.
Beautiful.
And again, James, I appreciate you letting me come on your show and mentioning it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I mean, it's been such an amazing conversation. I've had a run of conversations recently with firefighters of your generation, chiefs and all different ranks, and to have these voices talking about the things that need to change, whether it's in the leadership and, you know, mentoring our officers, or we're talking about work weeks and mental health and fitness standards, it's a very powerful voice, because we romanticize about your generation, you know, the old salts. But when you're saying, you know, no, we were wrong about not wearing our packs, we were wrong about saying, suck it up, buttercup, you know, this is what we need to change. I think it's an imperative voice for the young fire service, especially. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me. And again, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And when our original conversation, that was another long one. It was very refreshing talking to people with like minds in the fire service. So thanks for having me.